Hello, my name is David Travis and this is the UX Tea Break. In this episode, I'll be looking at heuristic evaluations. So what I'm answering here is a question from one of my Udemy students, Victor Gonzalez. And Victor asks, can a single expert carry out a heuristic evaluation or must you use a team of evaluators? And is there any value in scoring a system against each heuristic or should you just report usability problems? Okay, so let's answer the first part of that question first of all, and that's to do with having just a single reviewer or having multiple reviewers. So a heuristic evaluation, remember, is a very specific type of activity based on some work that Jacob Nielsen carried out. He came up with 10 what he called usability heuristics, and those heuristics are principles or guidelines for ensuring good usability. In his method, and it is his method because he invented heuristic evaluation, he recommends you use 3 to 5 evaluators when you do these reviews, and that's because if you just have one evaluator, they only find a subset of the overall problems. In his work, I think it was typically about 60% of the problems that are found. And so if you have 3 to 5 evaluators, you find more problems. Now, there's another format for heuristic evaluation known as an expert review. So they're all part of the same group of methods. With an expert review, you recruit other usability principles or guidelines that you use to do an evaluation of a system. Now, given that even with one reviewer, you're going to find a whole bunch of problems. It's 60%, let's say, of the overall problems that 3 to 5 evaluators would find. It kind of makes sense to get what you can get with that one reviewer. I mean, 60% of a big number is still a big number. And also typically I find when I'm working with low maturity organisations, they may never in the past have ever done an evaluation. And as a consequence, you find loads of problems to begin with. Now, 3 to 5 evaluators would find even more, but you're still finding some, and that's quite useful, which means that organisation can then move on. I'd be reluctant to say you were doing a heuristic evaluation if you just used one reviewer because it's not meeting Nielsen's criteria. But if you want to do an expert review and you want to find problems and you want to be practical, by all means, one person is okay to keep going. Try and recruit more people if you can to do the review. But I've done reviews with just myself in the past. I'm keener to do them with more reviewers, but often a client will only pay for one reviewer, in which case you do what you're able to do. You're going to find problems. It's okay to use one reviewer in those situations. The second part of the question was to do with is there any value in scoring a system against each heuristic, or should you just report usability problems? Again, going back to Nielsen's specific method, there was never anything that he wrote about where you score a system against the heuristics. The heuristics are there to find usability problems. I guess I need to take a little bit of blame for that myself because a while back I wrote a blog post called 247 Web Usability Guidelines where I included a spreadsheet with a whole shed load of guidelines in for evaluating websites. And what I did was I divided the guidelines into separate sections such as information architecture and trust and credibility, for example. And because they were divided into separate sections, I made it so that you could then score the system you were evaluating on how many of those guidelines the system passed on, which means you could come up with a number. Now, is that number useful? Does it tell you anything? I think one reason that number can be useful is it can engage the design team. A system that scores 30 or 40% is clearly there's something going on there compared with one that scores 70 or 80%. The other one isn't necessarily twice as good because you don't know the ones that it has not scored so well on. They could be really, really important ones, such as a lack of task focus, compared with something like not having your form labels in the right place. So some problems are much more significant than others, and the score doesn't allow you to see that. But it does help you engage the team a little. It's also possible that the same reviewer could use the same guidelines to evaluate a system, say 3 months down the line, and you could see whether or not it had improved against some of those guidelines. So there is some some worth, I think, in putting those and collecting those numbers in that specific situation. But generally, I would say you don't want to give numbers with an expert review. What you want to do, if you want numbers, you should be looking at another method, like a usability test, where, for example, you can have a score for success rate, you can have a score for efficiency, how long people take on tasks, and so on. So I would downplay the usefulness of scoring. Well, I hope that answered your question. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to hear about other UX Tea Break videos that I put out, then please click on the subscribe button.